The Kralix pride gathered in the ceremonial grounds as the twin suns cast long shadows across the red sand. Elder Threx held the small cub up for all to see, his massive clawed hands dwarfing the tiny body. The cub mewed softly, reaching out with small paws that ended not in the traditional razor-sharp retractable claws of their species, but in blunt, rounded nubs. "This one is flawed," Threx announced, his voice carrying across the assembly. "Born without the claws that define us as hunters, as warriors, as Kralix. To keep him would weaken our bloodline." The cub's mother stood silent, her eyes downcast. In Kralix culture, the elder's word was absolute. A cub without claws could not hunt, could not defend the pride, could not fulfill the sacred duties passed down through generations. The decision had already been made. Vash was left at the edge of the settlement, placed gently on a woven mat with enough food for 3 days. It was more mercy than some planets would show. The Kralix did not kill their flawed young, but neither did they raise them. Nature would decide. They believed that on the 3rd day, Kalen found him. The human researcher had been studying Kralix social structures from a respectful distance, careful not to interfere with the indigenous culture. But when his scanners picked up the small life sign growing weaker by the hour, academic protocol seemed suddenly less important than the tiny creature crying in the wilderness. Vash was barely conscious when Kalen reached him, the food gone, his small body trembling. The human scooped him up carefully, wrapping him in a thermal blanket from his field kit. "Hey there, little one," Kalen whispered, examining the cub's paws. He understood immediately what had happened. He had read about similar practices in his cultural studies, though reading about it and seeing the reality were very different things. Back at his research station, Kalen set up a small habitat area. He had no idea how to raise a Kralix cub, but his database had nutritional information, and basic mammalian care principles seemed universal enough. He synthesized a milk formula close to what the scanners suggested, and Vash drank hungrily. Days turned into weeks. Vash grew stronger, his golden fur becoming thick and lustrous. He followed Kalen everywhere, chirping happily when the human returned from collecting samples. Kalen found himself talking to the cub constantly, explaining his work, reading aloud from books, filling the station with a warmth he had not realized was missing. The human noticed something the Kralix had not considered. Without claws to rely on, Vash developed other skills. His hearing became remarkably acute, able to detect the slightest sounds. His problem-solving abilities were extraordinary for one so young. When Kalen accidentally locked himself out of a storage compartment, Vash studied the mechanism for only a few minutes before manipulating the manual override with his paw pads. "You are brilliant, you know that." Kalen laughed, scratching behind the cub's ears. Vash purred, a deep rumbling sound that vibrated through his entire small body, but Kalen worried. What would happen when Vash grew older? The Kralix were a proud warrior species. How would a clawless Kralix survive in a society that valued martial prowess above all else? The answer came from an unexpected source that a Kralix hunting party encountered Kalen and Vash during a field expedition 6 months after the adoption. The warriors stopped, their amber eyes fixed on the cub playing near the human's feet. One stepped forward, recognition dawning. "That is the flawed one," the warrior said. "He should have perished." "His name is Vash," Kalen replied calmly, standing between the warrior and the cub. "And he is not flawed. He is different. Without claws, he is nothing. He cannot hunt. He cannot fight." Kalen knelt down, and Vash immediately climbed onto his shoulder, a position of trust and affection. "He can do many things your claws cannot. He can solve complex problems. He can understand patterns. He can show compassion and loyalty. Are these not also valuable?" The warrior seemed confused by the concept. "You speak of weak things. A Kralix must be strong." "Strength comes in many forms," Kalen said. "I have no claws either, yet humans have survived and thrived across hundreds of worlds. We adapt. We think. We care for those who are different. That is our strength." The hunting party left, but word spread. The human who kept the clawless cub became known among the Kralix. Some saw it as foolishness. Others began to wonder. Years passed. Vash grew into a young adult, smaller than typical Kralix, but healthy and happy. He helped Kalen with research, his unique perspective often revealing insights the human had missed. They were an unusual team, but an effective 1.1 day. A Kralix elder arrived at the research station. Not Threx, who had passed seasons ago, but a younger one named Syrah. "I must see this clawless one who thrives," Syrah said. Kalen brought Vash forward. The young Kralix stood straight, meeting the elder's gaze without shame. Syrah examined him carefully, then looked at Kalen. "You have done what we thought impossible. The flawed one lives well." "He was never flawed," Kalen said gently. "Just different. And in that difference, he found his own path." Syrah was quiet for a long moment. "Perhaps we have been wrong to measure all cubs by the same claws. Perhaps there are different ways to be Kralix." It was not a revolution, not yet, but it was a beginning. Vash curled up beside Kalen that night, purring contentedly. The human stroked his fur, grateful for the day he had chosen compassion over protocol. "You changed their world just by being yourself," Kalen whispered. "That is the greatest strength of all." In the darkness, Vash's eyes gleamed with contentment. He had no sharp claws, but he had something better. He had a home, a purpose, and a human who saw him not for what he lacked, but for all he was, and he was happy.